Parties are supposed to be moments of union. At least that's what I believed. An evening where you show up as a couple, stand by each other, exchange smiles, maybe dance once or twice, and leave together with the quiet satisfaction that you represented something solid. That's what I had in my head when Melissa and I walked through the doors of that hall. It wasn't a massive event, but it was important. A work colleague of mine had invited us, and I wanted to present us as a strong pair. For weeks, I've been telling her how much it mattered to me. I ironed my shirt with care, polished my shoes, even practiced in the mirror how I'd introduce her as my wife, with pride, with assurance. When we arrived, I placed my hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd. She looked stunning, there's no denying it. A navy blue dress that hugged her in all the right places, hair falling in soft waves, makeup subtle but sharp. She had the kind of presence that drew eyes without her even trying. And I thought, selfishly, tonight she'll be with me. Tonight she'll stand by my side. That illusion didn't last. The first blow came within minutes. While I stopped to greet a few colleagues near the entrance, Melissa slipped away. I assumed she'd gone to grab a drink, or maybe find a seat. But when I turned around, she wasn't there. My hand was empty, my introductions suddenly hollow. Well, she was just here. I trailed off, feeling ridiculous as the others politely smiled. I scanned the room, and there she was, already mingling, already laughing with a group of strangers I didn't even know. Her glass of champagne sparkled in the light. Her head tilted back in laughter that I hadn't heard directed at me in months. My stomach sank. I walked over, hoping to reclaim her attention, maybe bring her back into my orbit. But the moment I approached, she glanced at me with the kind of look you give someone interrupting a story, as if my presence was inconvenient. She didn't take my hand. She didn't pull me into the conversation. She didn't even introduce me. She just kept talking as though I were invisible. I lingered, awkwardly holding my drink, until one of the men in the circle asked politely, "And you are?" That question sliced me open. "And you are?" I was her husband, the man who paid for the house, who shared her bed, who carried her through countless storms. And yet, in that circle, I was a stranger. She hadn't thought to say, "This is my husband, the man I came here with." No, I had to announce myself like an uninvited guest. The conversation moved on quickly, but I couldn't shake the sting. I excused myself and drifted away, choosing a quiet corner near the bar. I watched her from a distance, my chest tightening with every smile she threw to others, every story she shared that I wasn't part of. She wasn't rude exactly. She was just detached. Detached from me, from us, from everything we were supposed to represent. And that's when it hit me. This party wasn't ours. It wasn't a shared moment, a united front. It was hers. She was thriving in it, feeding off the attention, leaving me to shrink into the background. I tried again later, approaching her with a simple gesture, offering my hand for a dance when the music slowed. She shook her head lightly, almost dismissively, as though the idea were absurd. "Not now," she murmured, turning back to her conversation. "Not now." That phrase echoed in my skull. Not now to dance. Not now to acknowledge me. Not now to even stand beside me. I felt stripped bare, not by her words, but by the absence of them. As the evening went on, I became more of a shadow than a spouse. I chatted with a few colleagues, forced a few smiles, but my eyes kept drifting back to her. She never once sought me out, never once reached for my hand, never once looked at me with pride or belonging. There's a specific kind of humiliation that comes when you realize the person meant to stand with you would rather stand with anyone else. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, subtle, almost invisible to others. But to me, it was brutal. By the time dessert was being served, I had given up pretending. I sat alone at a table, my jacket draped over the chair, sipping water to fill the void in my throat. Laughter, clinking glasses, music, it all blurred into noise. All I could feel was the emptiness beside me, where my wife should have been. That was the night the idea of we began to crack. And it was in that crack that someone else's voice slipped in, the voice that would change everything. Crowded rooms have a strange way of exposing loneliness. You'd think the noise, the chatter, the laughter would drown it out. But in reality, it makes the silence inside you deafening. That's exactly how I felt that night, surrounded by people, yet somehow more isolated than if I'd been sitting at home alone. Melissa was glowing. She floated from group to group with practiced ease, her smile lighting up every cluster of conversation. She was magnetic. Men leaned in closer. Women touched her arm as they laughed. Everyone wanted a piece of her. And there I was, a ghost haunting the same party, watching from the sidelines like an outsider who had accidentally walked in. At first, I tried to insert myself. I joined a small circle near the bar, colleagues I half knew from work. We exchanged pleasantries, sipped our drinks, cracked a few jokes. But my mind wasn't with them. My eyes betrayed me, scanning the room, always landing back on her. She never once looked in my direction. Every time she threw her head back in laughter at some stranger's story, a knife twisted deeper. That laugh used to belong to me. It used to fill our kitchen during dinner, echo across our living room when we watched something silly on TV. Now, it was currency she spent freely on anyone but me. I excused myself from that circle, claiming I needed to grab another drink. The bartender didn't even ask what I wanted. He just refilled my glass automatically, probably noticing the look of a man who had nowhere else to be. I took the glass, turned around, and leaned against the counter, observing. What I saw made my chest tighten. Melissa leaned in close to one of the men, her hand brushing his arm, casually, naturally, like it wasn't the first time she'd done it. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe it was just her being social. But to me, standing across the room, it was another reminder of how invisible I'd become. And that's when it hit me. Not only was I being ignored by my wife, but others were starting to notice. I caught one of my coworkers giving me a sympathetic look from across the room, as if he could see the humiliation dripping off me. He quickly looked away when our eyes met, but the damage was done. My shame wasn't just internal anymore. It was on display. I wandered, trying to keep busy. I checked my phone more times than necessary, scrolling through emails I didn't care about just to look occupied. I stood by the buffet table, nibbling at food I couldn't taste, pretending to study the labels on wine bottles as though I were deeply invested in the vintage. Anything to avoid looking like a man abandoned in plain sight. But no matter what I did, the truth was obvious. I was alone. Alone in a marriage. Alone in a crowd. Alone while the woman who vowed to stand beside me chose to orbit everyone else. The music shifted, a slow rhythm filling the room, and couples began drifting onto the dance floor. I watched husbands leading wives, boyfriends twirling girlfriends, even older couples swaying gently together with smiles that spoke of years of shared history. It should have been us out there. It should have been our moment. But Melissa was across the room, laughing, glass in hand, utterly unconcerned with the fact that I was sitting at an empty table watching strangers hold each other. It's one thing to feel neglected in private. It's humiliating, yes, but at least it's hidden. But when neglect plays out in front of an audience, it becomes something darker. It becomes a performance of rejection. With you cast as the fool everyone secretly pities. I could feel my ears burning, my jaw tightening. I wanted to get up, to pull her aside, to demand she acknowledge me. But a deeper voice inside stopped me. What would that accomplish? She would roll her eyes, dismiss me, maybe scold me for making a scene. I'd be the jealous husband, the insecure man. No, better to sit in silence than feed her another reason to treat me like I was pathetic. So I stayed seated, my hand tightening around the glass until my knuckles turned white. I stared at the couples on the dance floor, the lights shimmering above them, the music wrapping them in warmth, and I felt like I was outside in the cold, watching through a window I couldn't open. That was the moment something hardened inside me. The loneliness transformed into anger, not the kind you scream out loud, but the kind that settles deep in your bones. The kind that whispers, "This isn't how it's supposed to be," and you damn well know it. And then, just as I was sinking further into that pit, it happened. A shadow fell across the table. I looked up, and there stood one of the guests, a woman I barely knew, but one who had clearly been observing the same scene I had. She smiled, tilted her head, and with a boldness that caught me off guard, she said, "Since you're single, why don't you dance with me?" The words slammed into me like a bolt of electricity. Since you're single. She hadn't said it to be cruel. She'd said it because that's exactly how I appeared. A man abandoned, sitting alone while his wife entertained the room. In her eyes, I wasn't a husband. I was unattached, available, alone. In that instant, everything shifted. The humiliation I'd been swallowing all night turned into something else entirely. Curiosity, defiance, and the first spark of power I'd felt in months. And that was only the beginning. Her words cut through the noise of the party like a blade. "Since you're single, why don't you dance with me?" For a moment, I just stared at her, unsure if I had heard correctly. The woman standing before me wasn't a stranger exactly, more of an acquaintance. Someone I'd seen at a couple of these gatherings, friendly but never particularly close. Tonight, though, she stood in front of me with a confidence that made the room feel suddenly smaller. Her smile wasn't mocking. It wasn't pity either. It was daring, playful, almost challenging. She had noticed what everyone else in that hall had silently observed. My wife had left me stranded. In her eyes, I was unclaimed. I let out a dry laugh, more to buy time than because I found it funny. "Single, huh? My wife might have a different opinion." She tilted her head, unfazed. "Doesn't look like it." Her eyes flicked across the room, where Melissa was still engrossed in conversation, her back turned to me as though I were air. "Looks to me like you're on your own tonight." The words stung because they were true, and the truth, spoken aloud in front of witnesses, even casually, has a way of stripping away the little illusions you cling to. I wasn't just imagining my isolation. Others saw it too. I could feel eyes on us. Not everyone, but enough. A couple at the next table glanced over curiously. Two men by the bar exchanged smirks, whispering to each other. It dawned on me. My humiliation wasn't private anymore. It had become entertainment. But there was something else under the sting. A spark. This woman wasn't just pointing out my abandonment. She was offering me a way out, a chance to reclaim some dignity, even if only for a song. She extended her hand. "Come on, don't make me beg." For a split second, I hesitated. The old version of me, the man who spent months waiting for scraps of affection, would have declined. He would have said, "No, my wife wouldn't like that," and stayed seated, swallowing the shame like medicine. But that version of me was suffocating. He was dying in silence while Melissa basked in attention. So I stood. The room shifted when I rose from the chair. Conversations dipped, heads turned. Not dramatically, not like a movie scene, but enough that I felt the collective awareness. The invisible man was suddenly visible. I took her hand, and we walked onto the dance floor. The band had slipped into a mid-tempo song, something smooth and steady. She slid closer with ease, one hand resting lightly on my shoulder, the other still holding mine. "You look nervous," she said, her voice low just for me. "Maybe I am," I admitted. "It's been a while since anyone asked me to dance." "Then let's fix that," she replied with a grin. As we began to move, something remarkable happened. The shame that had weighed on me all night began to loosen its grip. People were watching, yes, but now they weren't watching the man abandoned at his table. They were watching a man who had been chosen, who was no longer invisible. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, Melissa turning, noticing. At first, her face was unreadable, but then the shock hit. Her smile faltered mid-conversation, her eyes narrowing, her posture stiffening. She didn't expect this. She expected me to stay put, obedient, humiliated, waiting. Instead, I was on the dance floor in plain sight with someone who actually wanted my company. That realization seemed to ignite something in her. She excused herself from the group she'd been entertaining and moved toward the edge of the floor. She didn't intervene yet. She just stood there, watching, her expression a cocktail of disbelief and fury. My dance partner noticed too. She leaned in, whispering with a mischievous smile, "Looks like you've got her attention now." The irony nearly made me laugh. Hours of neglect hadn't stirred a flicker from Melissa, but the sight of me in someone else's arms had cracked her mask instantly. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. My wife's power over me wasn't rooted in love. It was rooted in control. She didn't care if I suffered in silence, but she cared deeply the second I stopped playing my assigned role. The song continued, and I let myself sink into the rhythm. Not because I was falling for the woman in my arms, but because the dance itself symbolized something larger. It was proof that I wasn't tethered to Melissa's cruelty, proof that I could be wanted, chosen, acknowledged. When the music slowed to a close, applause rippled lightly across the room. Nothing grand, just polite appreciation. But I caught the looks, knowing smiles, raised eyebrows, people exchanging glances that said, "Did you see that?" As we stepped off the floor, my partner squeezed my hand. "You're not as invisible as you think," she said softly. Then she winked and disappeared back into the crowd, leaving me standing in the center of the room, no longer just a shadow. Melissa was waiting. Her jaw was tight, her eyes blazing, her glass of champagne trembling in her grip. She didn't speak right away. She just glared at me, seething. The silence between us wasn't cold anymore. It was volatile, crackling with jealousy and rage. And in that silence, for the first time all night, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: control. There are moments in life that feel small on the surface, but change everything beneath it. For me, it was that dance. Not the steps themselves, not the rhythm of the music, but the meaning behind it. I wasn't just dancing with another woman at a party. I was reclaiming something my wife had stolen from me for months: my dignity. When I first stepped onto the dance floor, my hands trembled slightly, more from nerves than excitement. But as the music flowed, something steadier took hold. My back straightened, my shoulders loosened, and for the first time all night, I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't the man sitting alone at the corner table, scrolling through his phone like a child waiting to be picked up. I was part of the room again. I was visible, and people noticed. The conversations didn't stop, but I caught glances. A few smiles, a few whispers. Some surprised, some approving. It wasn't scandalous yet. It was subtle, but it was enough to shift the air. Everyone had seen my wife leave me stranded. Everyone had seen me fade into the background. Now they saw me standing tall, moving to the beat, not asking permission to exist. But the most important pair of eyes were Melissa's. She stood frozen near the edge of the crowd, her lips parted slightly, her posture stiff. Her expression was a blend of disbelief and fury, the kind of look people give when they realize they've lost control of something they thought was theirs forever. For months, she had trained me into silence with her coldness. She thought she could erase me by ignoring me. And yet, here I was, proving to her in the most public way possible that I didn't need her acknowledgement to be seen. The woman in my arms leaned closer, whispering, "She's burning holes through you right now." I chuckled under my breath, but inside, I felt something shift. The power dynamic had flipped. For so long, Melissa's silence had been the weapon. Now my defiance, wordless, simple, dignified, was the strike that shattered it. When the song ended, my partner gave me a final smile, squeezed my hand, and melted back into the crowd. She didn't linger. She didn't need to. The point had already been made. I stayed where I was, at the center of the floor, my chest rising and falling with a calm I hadn't felt in months. And that's when Melissa stormed over. Her heels clicked sharply against the wooden floor, her eyes locked on mine like daggers. She stopped just inches away, her voice low but trembling with rage. What the hell was that? I didn't flinch. It was a dance. Her jaw tightened. "Don't play dumb with me. You embarrassed me in front of everyone." The irony nearly made me laugh. "Embarrassed you? Melissa, you've been ignoring me all night. You walked in here with me and then acted like I didn't exist. If anyone embarrassed us, it was you." She looked around, as though checking who might be listening. A few people nearby pretended not to notice, but I could feel their ears perked. The tension between us wasn't subtle, it radiated. Melissa leaned in closer, her whisper sharp enough to cut glass. "You're making a fool of yourself. Dancing with strangers, letting people think. Letting people think what?" I cut her off. That I'm alive? That I'm worth someone's time? That I'm not just some shadow you drag around and ignore? If that's what they think, then maybe it's about damn time. Her eyes widened, fury mixing with panic. She wasn't used to this. She was used to me bowing my head, swallowing the hurt, playing the quiet husband. This version of me, calm, steady, unbending, was new to her, and it terrified her. The silence stretched between us, heavier than the music still playing. Around us, couples swayed, laughter bubbled, glasses clinked. But for us, the party had shrunk into a battlefield. Finally, I stepped past her, not waiting for her permission, not waiting for her to acknowledge me. I walked to the bar, ordered another drink, and leaned against the counter with ease. And I knew she was watching. That's when it clicked for me. Dignity isn't about shouting or making a scene or proving to others how wrong someone else is. It's about refusing to beg, refusing to shrink, refusing to let someone's neglect define you. That dance, that calm walk to the bar, it was my way of saying, I don't need your crumbs anymore. Melissa tried to salvage her control after that. She floated back into conversations, forcing laughter, forcing smiles, but her eyes kept flicking toward me. Every time someone else leaned in to talk to me, her posture stiffened. Every time I smiled, her jaw clenched. The roles had reversed. Now she was the one on edge. She was the one fighting for ground. I didn't rub it in. I didn't flaunt it. I simply carried myself with the ease she had tried to strip from me. And the more I did, the more restless she became. By the time another slow song filled the air, she approached me again, this time with desperation hidden behind her carefully painted face. "Come dance with me," she said, her voice strained, as though the words burned her throat. I looked at her for a long moment, letting the silence stretch. Then I shook my head slowly. Not now. Her breath hitched. It was the same phrase she had used to dismiss me earlier in the night, the one that had humiliated me in front of others. Now it was mine. Simple, cold, final. Her face crumpled just slightly before she forced it back into place. She turned away quickly, but I'd already seen it, the crack in her armor. And that's when I realized the truth. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to fight. The quiet refusal, the dignity of standing tall without begging, was louder than any argument I could have made. That night, the balance of power shifted. Melissa had come to the party expecting to shine while I faded. But I'd found my own light, and she couldn't dim it anymore. It didn't take long for Melissa's mask to fall apart. All evening she had floated around the room with her carefully curated laughter, her sparkling eyes, her hand resting casually on wine glasses as though she owned the night. But after I turned her down, after I said, "Not now," in the same cool tone she had once used to dismiss me, the cracks started showing. At first it was subtle. Her smile looked tighter, her laugh more forced. I watched as she tried to engage with another group of people, nodding along to a story she clearly wasn't listening to. Her eyes kept darting toward me, as if checking to see whether I was watching her, or worse, whether someone else was. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I carried on conversations of my own, laughing when someone told a joke, leaning casually against the bar with an ease I hadn't felt in months. And it burned her alive. I could see it from across the room. The twitch in her jaw, the way her hand gripped her glass too tightly, the stiffness in her shoulders. Finally, she couldn't hold it in any longer. She marched across the floor, her heels striking the wood like gunfire, and stopped directly in front of me. The chatter around us softened almost instinctively. People sensed something brewing. "What exactly are you trying to prove?" she hissed, her eyes blazing. I looked at her calmly, sipping my drink before answering. "Nothing. I'm just enjoying myself." Her voice rose, sharp and cutting. "Enjoying yourself? By making a spectacle of me? By humiliating me in front of everyone here?" A few heads turned, curious. My pulse quickened, but I refused to let her see it. "Funny," I said evenly. "I thought I was the one being humiliated tonight, sitting alone while my wife pretended I didn't exist." Her nostrils flared, and for a moment she seemed at a loss for words. Then she snapped, her voice louder than she intended. "You're acting like a child, dancing with strangers just to get attention. It's pathetic." The word hit hard, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "You call it pathetic. I call it proof that I don't have to beg you for acknowledgement." Her face twisted, a mixture of anger and panic. "So what? This is revenge. You think dancing with someone else makes you a man again?" I met her gaze without wavering. "No. What makes me a man is refusing to sit quietly while you erase me. I'm done playing invisible, Melissa." The silence that followed was suffocating. She opened her mouth as if to retort, but nothing came. The truth, spoken aloud, had stolen her weapon. Around us, I could feel the weight of eyes. People were pretending to chat, to sip their drinks, but they were listening. They had seen her neglect me all night, and now they were witnessing her unravel. Melissa realized it too. Her pride, the image she worked so hard to maintain, was slipping through her fingers. Desperation crept into her voice. "We'll talk about this later." "Not here." I shook my head. "No, Melissa, we won't talk later. You made this public the moment you decided to treat me like a stranger in front of everyone. I didn't create this scene. You did." Her cheeks flushed crimson, and her hand trembled as she set down her glass on the nearest table with a sharp clink. "You don't understand what this looks like," she muttered. "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said, my tone firm but calm. "It looks like a wife who abandoned her husband at a party. It looks like a man who finally realized he doesn't need to beg for scraps of affection. And it looks like everyone else here can see exactly what's happening." Her eyes widened, and for the first time all night, I saw something in her expression that hadn't been there before. Fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of losing me. Fear of being exposed. She reached for my arm, her nails digging slightly into my sleeve. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Stop. Don't do this here." I pulled my arm back gently but firmly. "Why not here? You had no problem showing the world how little I mattered. Now they can see the truth, that I won't stay quiet anymore." The words landed like a slap. She staggered back a step, her breathing uneven, her carefully crafted image shattering under the weight of reality. People around us tried to hide their reactions, some looking down, others sipping their drinks too quickly, but the tension was undeniable. The whispers had already started. The queen of the room had just been dethroned, and by the very man she thought she could erase. Melissa's voice cracked one last time, trembling with rage and desperation. "You're going to regret this." I stared at her, my chest steady, my voice calm. "No, Melissa, the only regret here is yours, for thinking I'd stay invisible forever." With that, I turned away, leaving her standing there in the center of the room, her pride shattered, her control slipping like sand through her fingers. For the first time in months, I wasn't the one humiliated. She was. The room never fully returned to normal after that confrontation. Even as the music picked back up and glasses clinked again, there was a tension in the air, like static that refused to fade. Melissa tried to rejoin the crowd, laughing too loudly at jokes, gripping her drink like a lifeline, but everyone could see it. Her veneer was cracked. And me? I wasn't angry. Not anymore. The rage, the humiliation, the frustration, they had burned away, leaving behind something sharper. Clarity. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to win the crowd's sympathy. The truth was already out in the open. Everyone had seen it. Most importantly, she had seen it. I sat for a while, watching her flail. Every few minutes her eyes flicked to me, pleading, but she couldn't summon the courage to cross the room again. Pride and fear were locked in battle inside her. Pride wanted her to save face, to pretend nothing was wrong. Fear screamed that she was losing me. Eventually I stood. The movement drew attention again, subtle but noticeable. People's eyes followed me as I straightened my jacket, drained the last of my drink, and set the glass gently on the bar. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't storming out. I was deliberate, calm, in control. Melissa's face tightened when she realized what I was about to do. She pushed through the crowd, nearly spilling her drink, and grabbed my arm near the door. "Don't you dare walk out on me," she hissed, her voice low but trembling. I turned to her slowly, meeting her eyes. "Melissa, you walked out on me a long time ago. Tonight was just the first time everyone else saw it." Her grip tightened, nails digging into my sleeve. "We can fix this. Just stop. Don't leave like this. Please." The word please from her lips should have meant something. Months ago, I would have clung to it, seen it as a lifeline, proof that she still cared. But now it sounded hollow. It wasn't love fueling her plea. It was panic. Panic that she had lost control, panic that the script had flipped, panic that I wasn't hers to ignore anymore. I gently pulled my arm free. "You had chance after chance, night after night, to fix this, to stand beside me. to treat me like your husband, not your shadow. And every time, you chose silence. You chose indifference. You chose yourself. Her eyes filled with tears. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I cut her off. My voice wasn't raised, but the firmness in it left no room for debate. And now, Melissa, you're reaping what you sowed. You left me alone long before tonight. I'm just finally leaving you back. The tears spilled over then, streaking down her carefully made-up face. She reached for me again, but I stepped back, the space between us more powerful than any words. For once, she was the one begging, and I was the one turning away. I glanced around the room one last time. People tried to look busy, but the scene was undeniable. They saw her desperation. They saw my resolve. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't embarrassed anymore. I wasn't humiliated. I was free. Melissa whispered through her tears, "If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back." I looked at her steadily, my voice calm, final, unshakable. Good, because I'm not coming back. With that, I turned and walked out. No shouting, no grand gestures, just the quiet certainty of a man who had finally decided enough was enough. The cool night air hit me as the doors closed behind me, and it felt like oxygen after months of suffocation. I inhaled deeply, letting the silence of the street wash over me. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I wasn't carrying the weight of her rejection. I wasn't waiting for her approval. I wasn't invisible. I was free. And inside that hall, Melissa was left with nothing but the echoes of her own choices. Choices that had led her to stand alone in a crowd, desperate for a man she had already lost.